behalf of the ASSIIUM team, I would like to welcome you guys all to the final round of the 10 points 2015. Before we start, I would like to invite the debaters from the government and the opposition team to take up their seats respectively. Alright, thank you, Victor. So the resolution for today's debate is this House calls for the reunification of Singapore and Malaysia. Representing the government team are Mr. Farah, Mr. Shazza, and Brother Aziz. And representing the opposition team is Sister Wafda, Brother Muslim, and Sister Jana. I'm also pleased to welcome the adjudicators for today's contest. Okay, we have 5 adjudicators today instead of 3. We have 2 guest adjudicators. Okay, they are Chief Adjudicator, Mr. Izhar, followed by Mr. Reba, Mr. Ravi, and our guest adjudicator is Mr. Fauzan and Ms. Wardia. So the debate will begin in any minute. We'll let the judge have some time to prepare. Alright, judge are ready. We'll now introduce the first speaker of the government team. Will speak for 6 minutes. Okay. Points of information of your eyes will not be allowed in the first and the last minute of the speech. Okay, the my timekeeper or the timekeeper, Ms. Amina, will ring the bell at the end of the first minute. Okay, and she will again ring the bell 2 times when there is only 1 minute left. Alright, I invite Ms. Farah to the stage. Just a reminder, all debaters need to speak on the stage for today.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear adjudicators, chairperson, timekeeper, members of the floor, and last but not least, our opposition team. Now, tonight's motion seems to recall one of Asia's most historical moments, which is the unification of Singapore and Malaysia, as well as the separation afterwards. Now, that is what most of us would be thinking right now, right? But we, the government team, would say that it's quite irrelevant to actually reenact those moments in this debate. Why? Because the context now is totally different from what it was back then. The reasons for merger back then are actually not apparent today, and our arguments and cases are not going to be particularly related to the incident back then, but more relevant towards what's in the context today. So let's get down to business. Now, the motion for tonight is this House calls for the reunification of Singapore and Malaysia. Now, when we call for something, it means that we see a need to perform a certain action that we feel under full certitude, and we recognize the eminently required leverage. Hence, the government team tonight urge you to approach this matter with an open mind and see truly what kind of plentiful benefits can be reaped off from this particular action, which is the reunification. Now, speaking of reunification of these 2 states, what does it mean exactly? Now, it is the unification of states that used to be together and are now reuniting. And in this case, the reunification of Malaysia and Singapore is the occurrence that causes Singapore to become unified again with Malaysia as one of the states after being separated before. Now, this is just for your information, but do you know that the supreme leader of Singapore, Singapore's former Prime Minister, there was just okay, never mind. That he thinks that this is possible, and he hopes for this reunification to actually happen. So why would you think he would say that? Certainly not for the sake of fun and humor, right? So we, the government team tonight, are actually trying to promote and address his sentiments. Now let's just get straight to the point as to why we think there's a need, why we are hypothesizing on the possibility of Singapore as re-merging with Malaysia. Now it's actually because we see that it is actually a means to eliminate weaknesses as well as leverage strengths. And this is possible through realizing the benefits of synergy once we are unified. Now, synergy is actually when the whole is actually better than the sum of its parts. Now, it's not that easy, of course. Realizing that we are better off together than actually being individually strong takes a lot of guts and a lot of swallowing our pride. But once we understand the benefits of this synergy of unifying, we can be the top proponents because it really makes teaming up that much better than being divided. Now, the expected synergy achieved through this merger can be attributed to various factors, such as increased revenues, combined talents, cost reduction, lower cost of living, more exports, and many more. This will be elucidated further by my teammates, and we are going to look at all aspects of this matter: the political synergies, the economic synergies, as well as the social synergies. In other words, this is for the betterment of both countries, which is why we're actually calling for it in the first place. And let's get one fact straight. When Singapore reunifies with Malaysia, it doesn't mean that Singapore has to conform fully to Malaysia, as to what most of us actually thought. It would actually be considered as one of the states, and it will reserve itself about minimum maybe 80 seats in the Malaysian Parliament, and will be actually included in the policy making as well as decisions. And a state can remain as a state as long as it doesn't go against the federal laws, just for your information, which means it is possible for Singapore to come out with their own policies. Now, the things I'm going to say tonight might not be easy on the Malaysian ears, but although I don't think I can say in Malaysian. So, let's have a look at the benefits of the political synergy of this unified Malaysia being the unification of these two states. Now, let me start by addressing the status quo. Now, you can see for yourself in Malaysian papers, now, almost every single day there's issues of political tension and contention being addressed between parties. Now, this is mostly due to the fact, due to their engagement in these biased policies, which lead to an inclination for populist policies rather than effective policies. And for information, what populist means is the policies are actually more towards gaining the popularity, not towards effectiveness. Now, this is actually unlike Singapore, because Singapore don't go for these populist policies, and these troublesome political issues causes polarity. It polarizes the country, it creates instability, and hence because of this, a lot of social and economic issues pop up. But by reuniting, the government team believes that these kinds of problems would lessen, if not solve. Now, take DAP for example. They are the closest parallel to CAP in Singapore. They took control of Penang in 2008 elections, and they make tough fiscal decisions, even though it isn't popular, like for example GST. But it actually worked, and Penang then became the best financially managed state from 2009 to 2012. Now, they actually reduced the debt of the state by 95%, from 360 million ringgit in 2008 to actually just 30 million in 2011. Now, what does that say? This is actually a very strong point to show that why Singapore's policies are stronger, essentially for the economic growth. Now, so what will be the solution again? Again, the solution will be the inclination of Singapore, will be the inclusion of Singapore in the policy-making process to ensure that these policies, the policies in unified Malaysia will have a higher degree of efficiency as well as effectiveness, and this will also remove the biasness in policy-making, which is beneficial in fulfilling unified Malaysia. And only through this collaborative framework can both of our potentials be brought to a higher level than we already are. And this will propel both of the countries up, and yes, not only in Malaysia but also in Singapore, which will be further explained by my teammates. And so my second speaker, Shaza, will be illustrating on the economic benefits of economic synergies through this reunification, which also links to the social synergies. And my third speaker, Aziz, will be explicating on how unifying will also lead to cost saving emanating from defense spending in Singapore, and also how unified currency is actually quite awesome. So dear opposition team, you might be fearfully hanging on to, or maybe sticking to the status quo right now and asking, why would the government be calling for this reunification. And again, the government team asks that, why not? Why do you think both Singapore and Malaysia are better off individually, and whereas they can actually achieve greater things with political, economic as well as social synergy? Because after doing this intensive research, we found that ultimately two minds are better than one. Thank you.
I will now introduce the first speaker of the opposition team, is Wafda, who will speak for 6 minutes. Wafda, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Chairman, respected adjudicators and audience of the floor, we, the opposition team, believe that reunification of Singapore and Malaysia is unnecessary. Even if the benefits even if there are benefits, it can be achieved without reunification. This proves that both countries can survive without it. Thus, there is no need for reunification. The government must therefore prove and show evidences and necessities of this reunification, and the government must also show us the evidences that without this reunification, these two countries cannot live and cannot be stable. Ladies and gentlemen, Singapore has been a stable country. It has been in a stable position 50 years ago, and so has Malaysia since 1957 after independence. With a reunification, the outcome is so uncertain. Will you raise the stability of the reunification as an uncertain prospect? What are the challenges, dangers, risks posed of this reunification were to happen? With that, I will be talking about the possible dangers of this reunification, and the second speaker will be discussing on the stability of Malaysia internally and externally, and the third speaker will be discussing on Singapore, of which we will see the current stability and continued survival of these two countries until today does not necessitate a reunification. Therefore, there is no need for a reunification of Singapore and Malaysia. There are many possible dangers to reunification. Any possible outcomes of reunification can also be a danger. Yes, we agree that reunification proposes and reaps benefits and advantages, but the reunification also holds disadvantages. So, is the government willing to sacrifice all of this for this kind of danger? Firstly, let me discuss to you on the Bumi Putra policy. As you all know, in Malaysia there is Bumi Putra policy where only the Malay who are born Malaysian will get certain benefits from the government. As we all know, Singapore practices racial equality as set in the Singapore Pledge, regardless of race, language, or religion. Each and every citizen in Singapore is treated fairly and equally. Singapore's meritocratic system has been deeply rooted among the Singaporeans. On the contrary, Malaysia, although still a multi-ethnic society, gives benefits to the Bumi Putra, where there are policies designed to favor Bumi Putras. These Bumi Putra are given many benefits, such as education scholarships, medical benefits from the government for free. On March 2009, Dato' Nik Aziz Nikmat stated that the term Bumi Putra is racist, and these policies prevent other races from receiving government aid. So how does the government propose of such differences to coincide with the ethnicity system that is so different? Can both Singapore and Malaysia reunite well? Secondly, who will be the main government party in the reunification if the reunification happens? Obviously, we all know that there cannot be two ruling main governments in one country. How do we come in terms when both government work under different structure? Although both apply the representative democracy, Malaysia has long practiced constitutional monarchy. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong is the supreme head of Malaysia, exercising power on the advice of the Prime Minister. He is responsible to dissolve Parliament and to call meeting when the Conference of Rulers. Meanwhile, Singapore practices constitutional republic. A constitutional republic is the state where the head of state is elected as representative of the people. The state has to be governed according to existing constitutional law, which limits the government's power over the citizens. Now, in terms of the political parties, both Malaysia and Singapore are ruled by one of its dominant political parties since the country became independent. The party ruling Malaysia in National Front, or Barisan Nasional, is a coalition of 14 parties, while Singapore, the ruling political party, is the People's Action Party, or PAP. And now, if the reunification happens, as proposed by the government, how can these two parties correspond? Thirdly, the government is trying to unify two different societies in terms of identity, mentality, and lifestyle. And if these two societies cannot be together as one, there can be more complications happening in the country and may eventually lead to worst-case scenarios, disputes, and unrest between the people. Strikes, demonstrations, and potential riots can happen. The citizens in both countries are brought up in a very different environment, culture, and lifestyle. For example, the education system is already very different, as one exercises English as a main medium of instruction, and the other exercises Malay as their medium instruction. Are both countries up for these risks and danger? Should Singapore and Malaysia face up with these challenges as a result of reunification? Will we risk what we have now for something that is uncertain, like a reunification? Do we really necessarily need it? Therefore, this motion should not stand. Thank you.
I will now like to invite the second speaker from the government, Ms. Shaza, who will speak for 7 minutes. I would like to invite Ms. Shaza to the stage.
Good evening to our chairperson, the timekeeper, as well as my honourable judges, my opposition team, and also my government team, not forgetting all the audience itself. So today our motion is this House calls for the reunification of Singapore and Malaysia. Before, let me rebut a little bit what the opposition team have elaborate and come up with. First of all, they have come up with, we need to actually the necessity to show and the evidence that the fact that this reunification does not kind of work, and at the same time it will cause unstability. This is where the government will come in and give out, like as the first guest explained, this reunification will bring leverages and actually and increase the stability of both countries and stuff. At the same time, it will like two minds come together and become a much more better state and country. Now, second of all, he was talking about, PAP and etc. Now, did you know DAP? DAP is actually from Penang. It is actually close to PAP. This is where they do not actually implement the policy, but also much more of a fiscal policy, but actually implement taxes to all the citizens in Penang, and they actually managed to gain much more. Did you know they actually managed to overcome their debts and etc. And they have became Malaysia, one of the Malaysian states, who remains Sakina, they actually gave has actually become one of the most in Malaysia an anti-corrupted state, and from 2009 2010 it has become Malaysia's best financial management state in Malaysia, reducing all the debt they have. Yes, sir.
You introduced DAP. You know, before they were in the coalition, they had little power in the parliament, meaning that the majority of this country reject DAP. So how do you suggest if PAP comes and reunite with Malaysia, they will reunite well?
Alright, thank you. Now, the point taken from the opposition team, but what I'm trying to show is with DAP, which is similar with PAP, DAP is actually a Malaysian state who actually works in in Malaysia and actually benefits something which is where they reduce debt. And right now, one of the economical problem in Malaysia is debt. So if they actually manage to counter that with a system, much more a similar system with PAP, of course Malaysia could actually handle that situation. Now back to my pointers. As I was supposed to actually elaborate more on the economic leverages and when what happened when the reunification can happen. So as we all know, or maybe some of us do know, that actually Malaysia's primary economic incomes is actually from the natural resources such as water, energy, agriculture, and etc. Whereas Singapore's economy is much more based on skills, enterprises, and also their specialization. So now just imagine if you were to combine them, both natural resources and also expertise. Boom! I am telling you, it's better than any calculator you're going to experience, and also I am purchased. And this, do you know why? Because when you have these two entities coming in together, you actually have they will actually give much more benefits here. When you have much more benefits, it will actually slowly, solve the social, economic problems and etc. Now, this reunification between Malaysia, where the resources, and also Singapore, with the skills, actually gives a central economy allocation of resources. With this central economy allocation of resources, it will give a much more and allows and economic synergies and also unexpected benefits. Now, when you have a much more stable economic base here, of course there will be a growth in social aspects and etc. Because once you have a strong economic base, therefore you will give social spillovers in the society. So, first of all, now, as we all know, for the last 2 years, Malaysia actually experienced one of their largest 2 days devaluation, where there is a declination of the Malaysian currency. So, of course, as Singaporeans will benefit, like, yay, more shopping in Malaysia, but of course not for the Malaysian itself. Now, what is when there is a devaluation here, or a declination of Malaysian ringgit, of course, this is because there is a lower demand in the Malaysian currency, and also there is no supply. When there is no supply, therefore there will be problems in the Malaysian economy. Now, when there is a problem in the Malaysian economy, all the governments are going to use the money and the taxes from the citizens, and they're going to use it in their economy just to actually help this out with their trade in import. But when you start doing this, there is going to be a reduction government spending, and when this happens, of course there is a deficiency in infrastructure. For example, you have a Malaysian cousin who actually has cancer treatment. Now they cannot really actually heal here and have to go to overseas. Why? Because the government is not spending enough on their healthcare and etc. Now, with this unification, for example, when Singapore coming in, when there is a central economy allocation of resources, with Singapore coming in, of course there's going to be more economic output, there's going to be more economic growth. When there is more economic output and economic growth, there will also be lower cost of living, but still they maintain a high standard of living here. Moving on to the next one, let's start looking at Malaysia. Of course, let's look at Singapore. All of us want to get married, right? But what is concerned, what we youngsters are facing and concerned are, we have like high pricing of housing. Our COEs and cars are getting much more expensive. Even our McDonald's ice cream from 50 cents is increasing to $1. So because of Malaysia's high cost of living, it has become it has caused like other implications in Singaporeans in Singaporeans. For example, when we have a high cost of living, therefore we have lower disposable income. And we have lower disposable income, this means that we have to work even more. When all this we have to work even more, therefore the citizens will need to work longer, and sooner or later they will pass their retirement age just for survival in Singapore. Now, what happened is when there is a reunification between Malaysia and Singapore, where there is a central economy allocation of resources here, is that it will actually help Malaysia's natural resources, so actually with the Singapore enterprises, skills, etc., will help to give much more, still maintain a high standard of living, but at much more lower lower cost of living. When you have a lower cost of living, you will have a higher disposable income, and then therefore you can actually, do more here, and at the same time increase Singapore's happy index, and as well benefit Malaysia as well. So with this economic growth and a very strong economic base, it will give a spillover to Singapore, not only in its economic industry and etc., but also a much more. It will give a social societal kind of spillover, which will give benefits to both Malaysians and Singapore. Thank you. That is from me, and good night.
I would like to invite second speaker from the opposition. It seems like he is very eager to speak. Mr. Hossein, second speaker from the opposition.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Members of the floor, before I as the shadow deputy prime minister, before I begin debating or emphasizing our points, I would like to reiterate and emphasize our stand, which is that reunification is unnecessary because it is not needed, because there are no causes to it, and there are possible dangers that can happen if reunification is done. Now, to the points given by the government, the second speaker has said about the economic benefits of this reunification. Yes, we do not deny. That there could be economic benefits. Like, for example, Singapore needs land. Yes, Malaysia can provide land. Singapore needs natural resources. Yes, Malaysia can provide natural resources. What we are saying here is that economic cooperation can be done without reunification, through the medium of ASEAN, through many other mediums. It can be done. For example, an example is the Iskandar project in Johor. Singaporeans are given privilege to do things in Iskandar. So what we are saying here is that if economic cooperation can be done without the possible dangers of reunification, why should it be done? Okay? Now, moving on. Now, she said about the social benefits of economic reunification. We say that there are also dangers to economic reunification. Imagine a spilling of rich people from now. If Singapore and Malaysia are reunified, then rich people who are rich in Singapore suddenly can spill over into Malaysia freely, and immediately. And this is a fact. When people who are rich, there will be more demand for land. It will get more expensive. Land will get more expensive. Things will get more expensive. If these things get more expensive, average Malaysians who are not from Singapore will feel the pinch. So socially, there could be dangers also from economic benefits. Okay, now moving on. Like we said, reunification is not needed. Why? Because reunification is not needed because both countries are stable. Now, I will be talking about the stability of Malaysia after independence. Okay. Now, internally, I'll speak of internally. Internally, the Malaysian economy is the 28th largest in the world. It is also growing at a fairly good pace of 6% per year. And it is also one of the largest producers of semiconductors, electronic goods, and it's also the largest producer of palm oil. And so, in terms of economy, Malaysia and estimates have put Malaysia's economy to be the 21st largest by 2050. So what we are saying here is that economically, Malaysia can survive without unification. They don't need Singapore to progress. What they need is that for the corruption to go down and for the inefficiencies to be rooted out. These things can be done without unification. It can be done through education. So, moving on. In terms of healthcare, she commented on healthcare, on people who are from Malaysia needing to go overseas for healthcare. Do you know that Malaysia's healthcare is considered to be one of the best in the world? It is third according to the American publication International Living, beating countries like Spain, facing countries like countries in Western Europe. So what we are saying here is that even in terms of healthcare, Malaysian doctors are qualified enough to do things, and it's among the best. And not only the best, it is one of the most cheapest. In terms of healthcare, it is one of the best. Okay? Yes?
But do you know that there's social welfare leads to government deficits? What do you think about that?
Yeah, social welfare leads to government deficits, indeed. But it is a need of the people, for the people to have healthcare. So deficits can be overcome if the economy gets better. So the government must focus on the economy while also caring for their people by providing healthcare that is affordable to all. Okay. Moving on, in terms of healthcare, I'm still focusing on healthcare. Immunization coverage, polio, BCG, and others. It is above 95%. So what we are saying here is that Malaysia can survive. Malaysia is good enough in terms of healthcare. Infant mortality rate is one of the lowest in the world. 10. It's one of the lowest in the world. In terms of the life expectancy rate at birth is 74 years, and which is one of the largest, is one of the highest in the world. So in terms of healthcare, in terms of economy, Malaysia can survive, and Malaysia is stable. Are we willing to risk all of this? Okay. Externally, Malaysia's passport is the 8th best in the world. Singapore's passport is one of the best also, the 5th in the world. So, and Malaysia and Singapore is the only Southeast Asian countries who are in the top 10 in terms of visa access. So what we are saying here, Malaysia and Singapore are doing well in terms of foreign relations. Malaysia and Singapore have not engaged in foreign fights, in foreign physical, sending armies and stuff. They have not engaged in this kind of things from the time of the first emergency, which was a communist insurgency. So they have not engaged in any things, and so they are stable in terms of external. Malaysia also has has a quite large army to protect its citizens. They have 80,000 people in the army. They have 36 light battalion infantry, 3 airborne infantry. They have the future soldier system to ensure that their soldiers are equipped with good weapons. And they have their navy have 2 submarines. They have 2 frigates and about 6 corvettes. In comparison to Philippines do not have any submarines. So they are relatively well developed in terms of their navy, and also in terms of the air force. They have modern aircraft. They have the Sukhois, they have the F-18s, they have the C-130s. So Malaysia can protect itself. Malaysia can survive economically. Malaysia can take care of the health of their people. Are we willing to risk this for the supposed benefits of reunification? Thank you.
I invite Mr. Aziz, the third speaker from the government, to the stage.
My points here before that. Sorry. Okay, hold on. Let me write my points down after I go. Okay, why is this necessary? Because we feel that under reunification paradigm, we were engaged in a collaborative framework of shared currency. If you look at the European Union, why do they engage in the euro currency in EU? It's now the second largest currency in the world, and it's actively traded. Okay, now I can list you down all the benefits of the shared currency of euro. Includes the main advantages is the elimination of fluctuations and uncertainties of exchange rate, which is there to say which Malaysia faces a lot of problems in this, and it lowers the transaction cost, stimulating more trade and free movement across the borders in Singapore and Malaysia. It increases the price transparency and stability, leading to a more integrated financial market. And lastly, there's a possibility of reducing inflation
in a shared currency under the point where Singapore suffers the high inflation. So ultimately, a shared currency under the paradigm of reunification culminates into the facilitation of economic stability and growth, which will undoubtedly bode well for unified Malaysia and SG. And especially, as my second speaker said, talk about the centralized economic platform for both countries, which will further leverage on Malaysia's natural resources as well as Singapore's acumen in trade and economy. Okay, what is the status quo now? Okay, the current devaluation of the Malaysian ringgit poses a significant impact, detrimental impact on Malaysia's economy. Why? Because as simple as that, a lower valuation of their ringgit causes an increase in the cost of production and increase the value of imports since everything is more expensive. Okay, it inhibits their economic growth right there and then. And in terms of Singapore's dollar, the high currency may deter their exports because now it's more expensive to buy from Singapore and distort their balance of trade, which will ultimately result in a lower GDP. So that is why we feel that a shared currency is very important in this paradigm, because it will elevate both countries' economic standpoint to a higher level. Yes, for that.
Number one, we never said that unification is better. He listed all the dangers. Number two, you give the example of European Union. It is an example of an economic cooperation without unification of countries. So we are saying that it is supporting our point. Thank you.
Hello, exactly. European Union is, I think, for shared currency, we believe a reunification is better because not only in economic sense, as my first speaker has said, the political impact. The role of Singapore in that collaborative framework to ensure that so that Malaysia can leverage, okay, so that they can move away from this race-based politics and really help, as in the citizens, in terms of introducing more policies which are more ingrained into the social matrix. Secondly, reunification will reinforce the safety and sovereignty of Singapore. Why? Because Singapore is a tiny state, and we spend a monumental sum of money to beef our deterrence in terms of military spending and also and our international image on the global scale to deter aggression. Why? Because we need it. It's a necessity. Okay. The status quo is this. Singapore has always viewed Malaysia as a threat, okay? As a possible threat, may not be probable, as a possible threat. And our military training and policies are centered towards that. I'm from NS and I know we have in Pulau Tekong, our training ground is really based on Malaysia's how they plant their trees, okay? So under a unified framework, we will re-evaluate our military policies and procedures, and now we will leverage on Malaysia's sheer size and power, so that it reinforces our sovereignty. So now this whole notion of threat is eliminated, and we can focus our military might on something more relevant, more important, and important. So where does that bring us? Okay. Once Malaysia is not viewed as a threat because we are under them now, we will specialize our military priorities and expertise on other possibilities of threat. And this is what we are trying to say. Because from here, there's two things which can emanate from this reunification. One, the reduction in cost of military spending, we spent 22 billion by the way, will lead to the reallocation of this fund of cost savings to other parts of the spending, for example, in education, in social, in healthcare. And secondly, the reduction in the duration of NS, because now we don't need 2 years. Malaysia's is 3 months, maybe that's a benchmark, okay, can significantly boost the economy. Why? Because now NS men who are usually 2 years out of the labour force can now enter the labour force at an early rate, and they can contribute to the economy even faster. And most importantly, the depreciation of skills and knowledge in that 2 years is more than that of 3 months. So they can actually bring the synergy in terms of economic growth within the framework. And we feel that this is a very important tool, which is only possible under the framework of a reunification. That is why we need it. Okay, and we feel that the savings and real allocation will not compromise on the efficacy of our Singapore defence. Because don't forget, it is as a result of a change in policies and our priorities. So even then, we will leverage on the central reallocation of sources from Singapore and Malaysia to ensure that to offset the cost savings. So we feel that reunification is necessary to actualize all these social, political, and economic benefits, which would not happen under the paradigm. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to invite the third speaker from the opposition side, Diana, to the stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, a few rebuttal before we begin. So the first one is, the government keeps on talking about how is it that there will be more benefits if there is a reunification. However, they do not consider how is it that there are also more risks too. And we actually have talked about how is it that it is dangerous for reunification. And if they were to able to actually provide solutions to the risks that we have just mentioned, then there will be the benefits that the more benefits that they keep talking about will probably go down a little. But still, there will still be more risks to encounter. Now, secondly, the case of the example of Bumiputra is mentioned just now. The government seems to not pay attention of what we have been saying. Bumiputra example that we have given just now was an example of the risk, of the danger if there were to be a reunification. So it means that now, obviously, independently, Bumiputra in Malaysia can survive, and independently, Singapore can survive in a social setting. However, only when this reunification happens, then there will be a tension between the system of a Bumiputra system and of course of a racial, ethnic equality and fair system. And thirdly, yes, before that.
So you believe that Bumiputra policy is important in the economic growth?
Bumiputra policy is something that has to do with the social that is linked to the people of Malaysia. So if they have been surviving throughout throughout their independence with this Bumiputra system. So if we were to put Bumiputra together with with Singapore, then they cannot adapt. There's no connection. They were like, yes, if you understand my analogy. Now, so the next one, the third rebuttal will be that you say that Singapore will be under threat if we were to not be reunited with Malaysia. So are you saying that there will not be other threats from other countries? So if that is the case, that we should be united with all the countries to eliminate the possibility of a threat. So moving on to my point. Now, sorry. Okay. So, as a third speaker, I'll be talking about how is that Singapore is already stable, it's already surviving so well. Now it's SG50. We have been surviving so well that we do not need a reunification, because obviously reunification can also invite different dangers and different risks. Yes. So the first one obviously is the economy in Singapore. Now, according to the Singapore Economic Development Board, now in the 60s we have only survived as a third world country, very poor infrastructure. We only have $320 as our GNP, and today guess what? We have like $13 billion to actually promote to contribute to our R&D, to our research and development, basically. Now we have a lot of industries. We have aerospace, alternative energy, chemicals, etc. We have emerging businesses. Now, natural resources, we have businesses of natural resources that encompass the aquaculture, agriculture, metals and minerals, and all this. Now, let us look at the rankings of economy in Singapore. Now, the economic performance, obviously, we are number one with best investment potential. Now, we also top 3 in foreign trade and investment. And then, we are actually top 2 most competitive city in the world. And, of course, we are Asia's best country to work in by World Economic Forum. Now, also look at the quality of life of Singapore. We are actually top 2 in Asia, 4th in the world for best quality of living, best environment, facilities, infrastructure, stable political climate. We have world-class transportation, and we have a really good healthcare system. So why do we actually need a reunification when we are already so stable in terms of economy? We are already doing so well, and why should we risk? Why should we even jeopardize our already stable position right now? Why should we jeopardize the situation that we are already currently in right now? Yes. Sorry. Moving on. The second point that we are talking about is education. Now, Singapore is already strongly committed to capacity building at all levels of the system, in terms of selection, training, professional development, and we are actually third in global education rankings. In the recent rankings in 2015, NUS is actually second best in Asian universities and 24th worldwide. So this could only show that actually Singapore already has a good education system. What more do we need? A reunification? What do we have to jeopardize? Should we risk the possibility of a disadvantage when we already have a good education system? Now, and of course the third one will be the relations, the international relations that we have. Now we have bilateral free trade agreement. We have ASEAN free trade agreement with other countries. All these have helped us accelerate in our economic growth, social progress, cultural development, and actually promote peace and stability. So if we already have all these kinds of relations, what more do we need? And again, do we have to risk whatever that we have today for our reunification? Okay. And then we also moved on, how is it that in terms of social indicators, according to Ministry of Social and Family Development Social Stats 2014, our standard of living, our life expectancy between 2012 to 2013 have increased from 82.1 to 82.5. And then our education literacy rate has also increased. Our social assistance has also increased. And of course our welfare, example, child abuse, has decreased from 2012 to 2013. Now what do we see here? We see progress. We see good things increasing and we see bad things decreasing. So with this, it shows that Singapore can survive. It shows that Singapore can progress. Singapore is progressing very well indeed. It shows that there is development and Singapore is still continuing to develop. So why should we actually risk all this just for a reunification? Yes. And with all that, so according to Lee Kuan Yew, on his book on One Man's View of the World, there are actually 3 questions that he predicted with regards to this unification story. Now the first one is, do people really want unification? Second, will we see unification? And third, should there be a unification? I'm asking the audience right now, do we want a reunification? Do not answer that, it's a rhetorical question. So should there be a unification to begin with? And obviously, the opposition have shown how is it that there should not be a unification because we don't need it in the first place. I proudly oppose. Thank you.
Speaker from the opposition. So we'll have a 30-second break for the judges to prepare and also for the debaters to prepare for the reply speech.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, members of the floor. Okay? In wrapping up our argument, I would like to go backwards, to move backwards. My third speaker has talked about how Singapore is stable. Singapore, in terms of education, in terms of literacy, in terms of NUS being one of the top universities in the world and one of the highest top universities in Asia, teaching a variety of subjects. So NUS, NTU, the secondary school systems and the education system in general is one that is producing results. Okay, and she has also showed how, in terms of economy, in terms of the financial industry, in terms of how it is the number one country in the investment economic potential. So Singapore, in terms of economy, in terms of its future, it is doing quite well. And also in terms of life expectancy, in terms of social assistance, in terms of child welfare, it is also doing well. Moving on to my point, where I have stated about how Malaysia is stable in terms of its military, in terms of its economy, in terms of its healthcare. All of these really important indicators of the survivability of a country is doing well, is stable. So the conclusion is Singapore and Malaysia is stable. There are problems, but it can be solved internally.
It can be solved if the inefficiencies in both countries are dealt with. So what we are saying here is that it can be dealt with. Now, why are we saying this thing? We are saying this thing is because we feel that reunification is not needed. Reunification is only needed if the survival of both countries depend on it. It is not needed. Reunification is not needed. And moving on, my first speaker talks about what? About the possible dangers. About the possible dangers if reunification is to happen. The possible dangers that can and sometimes will affect the stability of both countries that we have belatedly proven or given to you, but from me and my third speaker. So she has stated on how, in terms of the identity and the mentality, in terms of the identity, in terms of one is a country that is primarily Malay, another is a country that is primarily Chinese, with the cultural implications that implies. And also one that implies a biased economic policy, and one that implies a supposedly meritocratic economic policy. So these two countries are countries that are neighbors, but are very different from each other. So if reunification is to happen, it can and it could affect, and it could be a danger to both countries. So we say that reunification should not be done because it is not needed. It's unnecessary because it is not needed. Thank you.
The government gave the reply speech for the government.
Good evening to the floor once again. So, first of all, the government and the opposition team keep on talking about whether the need of reunification will only happen when there is a need of instability. The thing is, you do not need instability for reunification to happen. Now, they keep on talking about all the risks to happen and etc. But the thing is, where are the risks? We do not deny there might be risks, but this risk can be, there are solutions to it. But with reunification here, right now, it could actually enhance and leverage more on the benefits, not only economical but also social as well. Right now, we do not deny the status quo, the fact that Singapore has the best education, best healthcare, etc. But why stay in the comfort zone there when there is benefits out there for you to outreach? For example, you see much more your favorite food there, but just because you are too lazy to get up and get it, do you just want to leave it there? Of course not, because this will bring benefit not only to the economic industry but also to the social the society as well. Now, that's it. Just now, the opposition team keep on talking about better standard of living and etc. But with all this benefits that Singapore, all this amazing advantages that Singapore has. But the thing is, Singapore is living in a high cost of living. When you live in a much more high cost of living, of course, you have like so many expenditures to actually spend on. This will actually impact your happy index and etc. Will cause other social problems as well. Now, the other thing is, like we have said, with this reunification of Singapore and Malaysia, it will actually enhance more. It will give much more leverage, not only economic base in the economic industry, but as well as the society as well. Now, we are talking. Lastly, we have mentioned about the Bumiputra and Bumiputra privileges and etc. As the first speaker has mentioned just now about the policies, policies essentially. What we're trying to say is that Bumiputra actually, with this Bumiputra, it's actually a step move to a corruption here, because these policies will actually corrupt the economic growth, and therefore there will be a depletion in the Malaysian economy. Hence, there won't be any societal kind of growth, etc. And I have mentioned just now regarding the declination of Malaysian currency and etc. And then as well as the high cost of living, with all this negativity, despite with this reunification, it will actually bring a much more leverage here, not only in Singapore but as well in Malaysia as well. Now the third speaker has also contributed, talking about the severity of Singapore itself, Singapore being a tiny country requires a much, with Malaysia, it can bring much more benefits in the defense system, and as well as talking about the shared currency here, when you can with this shared currencies, it can actually help both not only Singapore's economic growth, which is actually stable and fine already, but as well as economic growth. And together, when you bring in one party and another with both advantage and disadvantages, there are going to be much more leverages, much more benefits, and much more benefits and advantages, hence giving both Malaysia and Singapore a much more holistic, a much more stable, and much more better country. Thank you and good night.
Presenter of the reply speech from the government. With that, we have come to the end of the debate. This debate round, will now let the judge take their leave and decide the winner for this grand final of the third point. I urge the debaters